Are manufacturers now, I don't know if it's the economic crisis or just a rethinking of what college completion means, are they seeing themselves as with a different sense of responsibility? That it's not just for their own interests that they're investing in college, but that there's a sense that America needs a different,
workforce?
not just a better workforce, that there needs to be a different responsibility of corporate America to growing a society that's going to sustain itself.
Yes, I would say there's a renewed understanding. What they've been missing and what we've given to them is the empowerment of the how. And I'll share an example in New York. Don McCabe, Senior Vice President from Corning, found that less than 50% of the individuals walking into Corning could pass the entry-level exam. These were individuals in his own community. And Don took a step back and said, is the test too hard? Are we doing something to weed out people in our community that should have these jobs? And he found out it really wasn't that. Don McCabe now sits shoulder to shoulder with his high school and with his community college, redefining what success looks like. And you know, I have a great empathy for our nation's education system. This has not been an easy path for them, and everybody seems to be pointing at them that it's their fault or their problem. And you know, one of the principals in Don's region said, you know, I feel like Rip Van Winkle. I went to sleep and I woke up and I'm working harder than I ever have with less resources, with less staff, but yet I'm still not doing enough for the students that I'm serving. And I think that's where the true public-private partnership comes in. There is a role for everyone. There is a role for government in this to incentivize change and remove barriers that allow for innovation. There is a role for industry in helping education understand what success looks like and what the opportunities are for young people that invest in their careers. And there's the role of the individual in the education system. You know, education is ultimately has a huge element of personal accountability. You need to be willing to show up. And you know, if you had a room full of 100 employers here, they all would say, if they just showed up on time, I'll take it from there. And what they really mean is, if they just show up on time, if they can read and write, if they have the foundational skills, and oh, wouldn't be a bonus if they knew something about my industry. And industry is not in the business of education. That is why it's an imperative for them to have those strategic partnerships. And we talk about that process as, you know, manufacturing is well known for what we call the leaning process. It's how we do more as a nation in productivity with fewer people. You know, we are the most productive industry, and we've done that because we figured out how to do it better, smarter, faster, cheaper, because the economics of globalization require that. We now need to apply those same principles to our human talent and our, you know, we refer to it as another element in our supply chain. And manufacturers manage their partnerships in the supply chain, and we've now said to them, you need to manage your human capital supply chain. And they understand that. If in fact they're ever going to have workers, they need to be active and engaged and at the table.
So it's a big challenge to meet this new mark. And what do you think some of the risks might be along the way?
That's a really good question, and I'll say I think the greatest risk we have is patience, systemic change. You know, we can demonstrate transactional success, but systemic change is really a much bigger investment, and we need to have patience and understanding, and we need to process improve as we go. And the other thing is, you know, we're educating supply and demand concurrently. We have set an architecture in place that says, you know, aligned to college credit, credential with labor market value is redefining what completion looks like, but nobody knows what that means yet. So, you know, I had an email this morning from an aerospace employer in Wisconsin. I'm going to pick up the phone and call them and explain to them what that means. Now, I'd like to say that I have the time to educate every employer in this nation, but I don't, because it's a strategic imperative that they start to understand. So having the champions in industry, education, and government, and that was really our message with the president. We stood together to say, we own this problem together. Government has a role, industry has a role, education has a role. But I do think our greatest challenge is the time it takes to educate and allow others to understand while we're concurrently demonstrating success, because manufacturers are desperate. They need workers with the right skills, and it is impacting our economic growth. So time is the enemy.
Exciting. It's exciting to think that there will be more jobs and more skilled workers. I'm also wondering about innovation. Manufacturing also needs to innovate.
Yep.
And where is the tension between students that come out, say, with a year with labor market value? Are those the ones that could grow into being innovative components of a growing industry that's going to change the world with its next new techniques? Or did those come from a different set of students?
Yeah. That's interesting. We're actually in the middle of researching that. We produce every 5 years a global skills gap report on manufacturing competitiveness, and we're getting at what does really innovation look like in the workplace, where does it come from. But what the leaning process in manufacturing has done is actually shift accountability for where innovation happens. And innovation happens on the front line with a worker that thinks, if I just did this one slightly way different, I can save money, I can save time, I can impact the entire before and after process. And what we know about innovation is, despite technology interventions, innovation is almost solely a human element. Therefore, what we are building with this approach is the human element, the ability to have critical thinking skills. So whereas you traditionally would see in a community college environment, there would be something called customized job training that sat on the side, that somebody can go in, get something really quick and go back. And that's our fundamental push to change education, which is, if in fact they get a credential with labor market value, it should translate into an education pathway where they can balance the rest of what they need to be successful in advance. And we often talk about the need to learn and earn concurrently, that ensuring we have that link of technical skills with the surround sound of skills you need for critical thinking, for teamwork, that in the end is where innovation happens. And innovation is the single most important factor to our nation's manufacturing competitiveness. But again, it's a human element. So it's bridging those two together that allows for success.
Learn and earn is an important piece, and I know we've talked a lot about reaching back, starting in high school and being prepared early, but what about workers that, older adults that have been, their work has been outsourced through globalization and have to retrain? Where do they fit into these pathways?
That's actually a good question, and I will say, though, this discussion tends to center on the community colleges and the young adults and the links from high school to post-secondary education. Our focus is on whatever door they come in. So for our nation's transitioning military, for our underrepresented populations, we just finished a demonstration in Texas on individuals with limited English proficiency, where that is, language acquisition was the first step to be able to even get on an education pathway. And I had an individual at the end of the program, we did a number of testimonies from students who said, I've worked at this company for 20 years and I never knew the names of the tools. How can you advance if you don't know what it is you're actually doing? So what our approach does is it actually neutralizes the difference of where you learned the knowledge, that prior learning assessment that is grounded in an industry credential, because what the credential allows you to do is assess, eliminate what they don't need to know, and accelerate what they do need to know. It's a better use of funds because you can then only train to the gap. You know, any seasoned manufacturer that comes out of someplace that was predominantly what I'd consider low skills, rules based, still understood health and safety. Why would I send him to a community college and have him pay for 3 credits of health and safety if he can test out of health and safety and get those credits anyway? It really creates efficiencies in the system. So regardless of whether you're the pipeline or you're the transitioning adult or you're highly trained returning military service men or women, you have a pathway into a successful career in advanced manufacturing.
That's great. Well, I really learned a lot, and I want to thank you for telling us all about it. Thanks. Thanks so much.
You bet. Thank you.